Welcome back to the Reading Corner with Mrs. G. For more great stories, subscribe here. Have you ever visited a fire station? Have you ever been able to slide down a pole? Probably not. Did you ever want to? Maybe. Well, Flat Stanley did. This is Flat Stanley and the Firehouse. Flat Stanley was created by Jeff Brown, but this story was written by Lori Haskins Houran. Stanley Lamb Chop lived with his mother, his father, and his little brother Arthur. Stanley was 4 feet tall, about a foot wide, and only a half an inch thick. He had been flat ever since a bulletin board fell on him. Stanley's family found it handy having a flat boy at home, and Stanley didn't mind helping out. Stanley held tools for his father while Mr. Lamb Chop repaired the car. Stanley helped Arthur practice his backflips. Stanley gave his mother, Mrs. Lamb Chop, a perfect place to roll up pie crust, except when he felt ticklish. Stanley made a good stencil too. "Hold still," said Arthur. Stanley held his breath as Arthur traced him carefully. Children all over the city were entering a poster contest for Fire Safety Month. "I hope we win the trip to the firehouse," said Arthur. "Me too," said Stanley. "I've always wanted to slide down a pole." The next Monday, a letter arrived. "Hey, guess what?" shouted Arthur. "Hay is for horses," Mrs. Lamb Chop said. "Try to remember that, dear." "Sorry," said Arthur. "Guess what? Our poster won the contest. We're going to the firehouse on Saturday." Mrs. Lamb Chop clapped. "I knew you boys had my talent for art," she said proudly. Stanley and Arthur practiced fire drills all week long. Arthur crawled around the house on his hands and knees. Stanley did the stop, drop, and roll, mostly the roll. At last, Saturday came. The Lamb Chops drove to the firehouse. "Welcome," bellowed Chief Abbott. A puppy bounced at his feet. "Arf, arf, 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 arf." "Don't mind Spark," said the chief. "He's still in training." Chief Abbott led the Lamb Chops through the firehouse kitchen. "We firefighters cook up some tasty meals," he said. Mr. Lamb Chop got out his camera. He took a picture of a pot of chili. Everyone went onto the bunk room. "Very nice," said Mrs. Lamb Chop. "Can I see the trucks?" said Arthur. "Of course," said Chief Abbott. He led everyone down to the garage. Stanley was disappointed. He had wanted to get there by pole. Boots and pants lay on the floor. "Oh my," said Mrs. Lamb Chop. "I could tidy up if you like." Chief Abbott laughed. "We leave these out so we can jump into them in an emergency," he said. "Neat," said Stanley. Chief Abbott pointed to the ladder truck. "Climb on up if you like." "Wow," said Arthur. The boys scrambled onto the truck. Spark was right behind them. Suddenly, the alarm bell rang. "Chief, code 9 on Oak Street," called a firefighter. The chief turned to the Lamb Chops. "How would you folks like to come along on a rescue?" "A rescue? Will it be safe?" asked Mr. Lamb Chop. "You bet," said Chief Abbott. "Code 9 means a cat up a tree. Probably furball again." Mr. Lamb Chop looked at his wife. She gave a little nod. "Yes!" yelled Stanley and Arthur. "Stanley, turn on the siren." "Arthur, hit the lights," shouted Chief Abbott. "My goodness, is that necessary?" asked Mrs. Lamb Chop. "No," said Chief Abbott. "It's just more fun this way." The truck raced out of the station. Soon it pulled up to a tall tree. A tiny cat shivered at the top. "She's pretty high up this time," said Chief Abbott. Spark panted at the chief's feet. "All right, let's get her down." Two firefighters raised the ladder. The lamb chops moved out of the way. Chief Abbott climbed until Furball was just a few feet away. "Good kitty," he said, stretching out his hands. "Come here, Furball." Spark started to bark. "Urf, urf, urf." For a second, Furball froze. Then she jumped the other way. "Furball!" cried Chief Abbott. He was too late. Furball was heading for the ground. The lamb chops looked up. Their mouths were open in surprise. All at once, Stanley threw himself onto the grass. "Grab my hands," he told his mother. Mrs. Lambchop grabbed his hands. "Grab my feet," he told Arthur. But Arthur didn't move. "Hey!" shouted Mrs. Lambchop at the top of her lungs. "Grab his feet!" Arthur blinked. He grabbed Stanley's feet. "Stretch!" cried Stanley. Arthur and Mrs. Lambchop stretched Stanley between them. They were not a second too soon. Boing! Meow! Furball bounced on Stanley's belly, then landed safely on the ground. The firefighters started clapping. Arthur and Mrs. Lambchop stood Stanley back up. Arthur looked at his mother. "Hay is for horses," he said. "Remember?" Mrs. Lambchop grinned. "Good work, Lambchops," said Chief Abbott, racing over. "How can we ever thank you?" "Well," said Stanley, "there is one thing." Do you know what it is? Whee! He got his desire. Slide down the pole. All right. Maybe you can arrange to have a visit to the fire station sometime. It's interesting to see the fire trucks and see what the firemen are up to. We definitely want to thank all of our firefighters.